discussion on some old business, Durbin Plaza. Joe?
Okay. I asked for this meeting to be called, let you guys understand where we are as far as the plaza is concerned. Pay $875, and they did the demolition plus any phase 1 or phase 2 that was required. They came back with, we'll agree, but we wanted to split the cost of the demolition in phase 1 and phase 2. That's the counter offer back from DIY. So that's what I brought before y'all tonight. And I think even if you can't make a decision, or if there's something else comes up, I think it is on the agenda for Monday also. Isn't that right, Greg?
That's correct.
But this way, this board can make a decision tonight if you want. Frankly, like Mike says, I think we're pretty close to this thing. I think they're pretty well. I just feel like they're fairly well locked in at this point. The only downside is if we don't come to agreement with them, and we go ahead and we do win the lawsuit, and we win the appeal, and go ahead and demolish it. I mean, it could sit there forever too. They still would own it. We would have a lien on the real estate for whatever we've got in it. But that doesn't mean that they have to do anything with it either. They can let it sit there.
Joe, do we know what they can demolish it for? Do they know?
Yeah, they provided me with, I didn't I say that? They provided a
What's the number?
estimate of $130,000. I said that, didn't I?
No.
Didn't I?
No.
Okay.
So that's their estimate for the full, that's the full
I
price.
guess I told Mike before the meeting. Yeah, and the attorney gave that to me, and I've got a copy of the estimate. I didn't bring it with me. It's on my cell phone, frankly.
So we could own it for $940,000. That's $875 plus $65,000.
Well, that's for demolition. That does not count phase 1 and phase 2. I think that estimate is max from ACT, Carl, was up to $50,000. So there could be another $25,000 if you just split everything. I don't know. Whatever you guys want to do. You want to go back with them with something else? You got three things.
So is it more than 940?
Could be.
Could be.
It could be. If the phase 1 and phase 2 is, phase 1 is going to definitely have to happen, and probably we think.
How much
phase
is
two-
that going to cost?
Up to $50,000. So
Okay,
you're looking at
so
180 total.
So that's 980 at this point. What's phase 2 going to cost?
It said 50,000. 1 and 2 together would be
Together.
50,000.
$1,020,000.
No. Phase 1 and 2
Is 50.
together would be 50. That's our estimate.
Right, for 980, we can own, that's what we're talking about.
That's
correct?
right.
Okay.
Now, this board they can stay where they're at,
Right.
which, if it's that close, I really doubt that they're gonna walk away, but that's my opinion. I can only suggest to the board,
Does
Or-
anyone remember what it was appraised for, property?
I think $875. I believe that's what the
Well, we
offer
had 2
was.
appraisals.
The average of the two, I think, was the $875. if I
No,
remember
it was
correctly.
less than, the average of 2 was less than that, but reason we could offer this, because we're also settling a lawsuit. They did file a lawsuit too.
Okay.
My feeling is you got 3 things to do. 1, you can say, no, we're gonna stick with the last offer. 2, we can say, yeah, we'll split it with you, or 3, we can tweak those numbers some. Maybe put a limit as to what the other part of our half is. Now, we'll spend up to $50,000 or $60,000. Those are the 3, remedies or decisions you all can make.
Discussion from the board? Anything?
If we do buy it, will we stop letting the distillery's trucks park there? Like they're parked over there, there's about 6 of them parked over there now on the property.
That depends on the vote of this board.
I mean, well, that's a lot of ifs there.
No, I mean, if we purchase it, we own it, then Redevelopment decides what happens over there. If they don't want those trucks there, they're not there.
What's the
But Tom,
condition?
I mean, keep in mind, Tom, I mean, about talking about the trucks, Lawrenceburg kind of wants to be a good neighbor. It's not hurting anything, and they're awful good business here and provide a lot of jobs and.
Right,
and
all right. But they're ripping that parking lot up.
Well, the parking lot's gonna be ripped up anyhow.
Okay.
Carl, you got anything on this? You'd like to say your opinion?
Well, my opinion was on the unsafe building. Board itself, like Joe said, you've got decisions you want to make. Do you want the property? If you don't want the property, do you follow through with the ordinance as it was written? We're going to pay for the demo if it goes to that point. That's going to be money out.
And phase one, phase two, too. We would be paying that.
Will be required. I mean, I've got in my head what I think is in that building. Think much.
Carl, let me ask you a question.
We have some tile.
On the unsafe building ordinance, if we went that route, did the demolition, we expended funds to do demolition.
I believe if you read it, and I've tried to pass it out at every meeting when we do these, the demo of that, according to the unsafe building, you only are required to demo the parts that are unsafe, immediate danger. That being said, nobody has ever said that that entire building is unsafe. Not only just structural, we have a complete mechanical, we have a complete electrical, plumbing, nothing works. You have to make a decision whether, if you want that piece of property, they're giving themselves an out. There was estimates of what it needs completely re-roofed. We have an expert out of Ohio, gave his opinion on the roofing system. A $200 and some thousand project.
Well, my question for the board is if we do that, then we wind up with a lien on the property, not ownership, and that could take years to come to a conclusion.
I believe, I don't think it would happen overnight. You're recouping anything. Exact date, years, I would say would be a good estimate. Once it's already been years, and it's still set.
I would just like to say to the board again, if it's this close, I just don't see them walking away, but the board makes a decision.
I agree with that too, that 875, that's more than it appraised for, and by the time you had that other half on there, it's getting back up around the site. I'd go back with the original.
And $875,000 for an empty lot is a good payday for them, if you ask me.
Well, the one thing we gotta look at too, of what I've heard from this, is if we go to a jury on this, it doesn't look good because we sold them the land to build a new store on, because that's one of the things they're saying, we stole their major tenant. Even though we're innocent of that, it still looks like Big Brother's picking on a little 80-year-old lady sitting in a court. I don't know how a jury's gonna find on that. And then we end up with nothing.
Little old lady never put a dime in it in all the years she had
And
it.
there is one other thing too. I will say, as far as the lawsuit's concerned, there's certain parts of the lawsuit we're not covered by insurance on. Any deliberate acts are not covered by the insurance. They do have tortious interference with their contract with Dollar General as one of the counts, which would be a deliberate act. It's not negligence. If there's tortious interference, it's a deliberate act. We're not covered by the insurance. If a jury were to find on that basis alone, it would be the city that would be paying any damage. That was
And what's,
Well, if Carl did not take the action he took, if somebody would've got hurt in there, we'd have been sued.
I agree with you. I'm just telling you, though, that
And Carl, you wasn't the one that actually Closed them down, right?
No, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about, Donnie, is if they feel that we have somehow cut a deal with Dollar General and, provide, and we sold them the land that they're on, and they find that's a tortious interference with their relationship with Dollar General, we could be liable, and the insurance company wouldn't be paying for it.
How much would we be liable for the price of the building, or
Pardon?
how much would we be liable for? The price of the building or
Compensatory
damages?
What was the rental for a year, or how many, I mean, that could be a large number. My feeling is, what we ought to do is at least come back and say, we'll pay for the 1 and 2. I don't think we ought to let it go at this point, myself. I think the city needs that. In the future, we'll have a place to put somebody of value on that land. And if we go this other route, right down the end of the line, we may end up losing the lawsuit. That place may sit there for 5 years. They can't find a buyer. They don't have the money, I don't think, to rebuild.
Carl?
If you were going to make an offer, that's exactly where I agree with Joe on that. The least expensive of all things that they're asking for is the phase 1 and phase 2. That's the least part of it. I don't know that I would get involved with the demo of it.
No, we don't want to.
Anything else from any of the board members?
Understand, though, the phase 1 and phase 2 is still going to be contracted by them, but I'm going to insist that we have a hand in saying who we're going to use and make sure that it gets done correctly. Because if we own the land, we definitely want to make sure that there are no slip-ups, because we're going to be guaranteeing it to whoever we put on there, that you can build on it. So I definitely want to see the city in control as to the phase 1 and phase 2 as far as monitoring it.
And if you add the phase 1 and phase 2 in, I would recommend only up to a certain dollar amount, so they can't come back with somebody.
You got a question out there?
Tom?
Tom Schneider, I live on High Street. If you compare where the dollar store moved to and what you paid for that property, and then do an analysis of the new building that's going to be put on there, plus the residential, you came out, you exposed yourself in the beginning for, I think it was $900 and some thousand is what you paid the Ballards. And then you paid more money because people couldn't move and all of this. So you probably paid over $1 million. That is less property than is where the shopping center is. So if you do a little comparison and you say, hey, if we go ahead and buy this and arrange for this, then you'll have a nice area of which you can deal with the distillery for parking their trucks or whatever in the short term, but it will be a good piece of property, bigger than the other property so on a square foot basis, you'll pay less.
Tom, we also received $375,000 for the property.
Right, so what I'm saying is you can offer
subtract
it.
that from the,
Yeah.
the million, so it's down. You're correct.
Yes,
But we did sell it for a good, I think it's $375.
that's correct.
So,
But you didn't sell it right away,
no,
so again, you sat on it.
things always seem to work out though, and
Yeah,
they're working out.
It's risky, but I think it's the biggest piece of property in the city, okay? And you could possibly attract apartments, whatever, if the economy keeps getting better, maybe
And we hope it
more of a
does.
chance.
Thanks. Paul, are you able to hobble over here?
My question is about phase one, phase two. And Grant, you and Carl got a lot of knowledge on this.
If there is a problem.
Are we worried about something that we have to worry about yet? Because that would be all about prepping a piece of land that you really don't know what type of building you're gonna build on it yet, or what you have to do. Am I thinking right or wrong? Would you be, how do you prepare for something that you don't know what you're gonna put in there yet? I'm all for getting a hold of this property because I truly believe it's hooked on to a very valuable piece of property there in Lawrenceburg, and it comes right out from the park and it's got all that. But do you make a decision on phase one and phase two yet? You really don't know what you're gonna put on there yet. So do you even consider that? I know you'd like to get it out of them or part of them out of them, but Grant, maybe you can.
Well, on the phase one, that's where they go back and look at all the history of what the uses were. Phase two is when they go actually out in the field and drill to find out. The biggest concern about that property is there used to be a laundromat there. So, but to your first question about how do you prep it for the future, you know, there's really, the best thing we can do is get it demolished, get the footers out of there, and cap it, get whatever the phase two says needs to be removed, make sure that's out of there, and then cap it and wait for a developer, because one developer may want lightweight foundations, another developer may think there's a 4-story there and we're going down 6 feet. It's going to have to be up to that developer. It's kind of like the situation that we have at the old mill site down here.
Well,
Concrete.
I was gonna bring that up. We've done 2 projects in the last 3 or 4 years, and no matter how much you guys think about this, just because you do a phase 1 and a phase 2 does not mean you're not gonna get into a project that ain't gonna have some problems, and you can't guarantee a buyer. We done a Boy Scout building that they had extras on, and you done a convention center that they ran into things. So I just would like to say and have you consider, I like the idea of getting the property, but I would hate to see that phase 1 and phase 2 hold that up.
Well, Joe, what happens at phase 2? Bad soil, everything. Whose responsibility to move it? All that there. Cost.
It'd be half and half.
I don't know, I'll let Grant, I'm not as, actually, all I know is what I've heard from Mario, so.
Yeah, whatever the phase two comes up with, that's what'll have to be part of the demolition.
Right now, they're thinking tile only, because there's no insulation around the pipes within the building as far as.
Right, and they got
But if the city has to pay for it regardless, there's no sense in worrying about it. I think that's Donnie's point. Who would have to pay if there's issues?
Joe, as you saying, that's part of the demolition. They doing all the demolition, all that cost would go to them.
Well, when we said you guys do the demolition, I told them phase 1 and phase 2 included, because I was listening to Mario and Carl. And that's when I threw that at them, and then that's when they came back and said they were concerned about phase 1 and phase 2, then they said, how about we split the whole thing? That's where we are right now. So
What about us change that we pay phase 1, they pay phase 2, that way the responsibility falls on them. If it's contaminated or whatever, to clean it up, get it to.
I don't know, whatever you guys want to do. But I think we're getting down real close to this. I think you guys need to decide whether or not you want this thing and then make it happen.
I think we want it, but you.
Dennis, and this is the last comment from the audience, because typically we don't have comments from the audience during our discussion.
I appreciate it. Dennis Hutchins, 118 Walnut. If I can just expand on Paul's one point, I don't want to talk about economics on it because I'm not up to speed on it, but if you go from Walnut Street to Front Street, the city has spent, he talked about the hook on it, the city has spent a huge amount of money from Walnut to the community center, the adult center rather, and it's the cap on the other end of that expansion. And I think a lot of thought has to be given to what your expectations are on what's going to end up on that end of that block, because that's a long block if you go from Walnut to Front, and it's an important piece there. That's all. Just to consider.
Thank you. Anything else from the board?
All right, so what's this final dollar we're gonna have to come up with, Joe? Demolition, phase 1 and phase 2, half?
That's
Or
their
just-
offer right now. Split the cost.
But I would suggest that you put a cap on that so that they can't come back with a friend and possibly or something that's got a big outrageous price.
Well, they've got one estimate right now of 130,000. It's a solid estimate. I've read the whole thing.
That's for demolition.
That's demolition on it.
Okay, so half of that, half phase 1, half phase 2, and they're estimated 50,000 apiece. And we cap that,
No, not 50,000 for.
50,000 total, okay, so that costs us another 25.
Right.
But you might be able to go back and just offer to pay for phase 1 and phase 2, they pay for demolition. You know, not take an offer to pay for half of everything, you know.
I think a good counter is $875. We pay phase 1, 2, they do the complete demolition.
Phase 2 could end up costing us.
Yeah.
That's the one we want to stay away from.
What if we went 825 and they,
875.
825 and they do 1 and 2 totally?
It was $875 to begin with.
Well, I know, but you're taking the 50,000 off, he's estimating it to cost. That way all the liability falls in their part.
That'd be silly for them to accept that.
That's
So
That's
we're
what
supposed
they-
to be silly.
No,
And accept it.
no, they're taking less than what they're.
Yeah, that's a
you're
less of
offering.
an offer than the original one.
The reason we were putting the demolition onto them was because there's less regulation if they do the demo than if we do the demo, so it's a direct savings for us there. So I think that whatever monies we can keep in the demolition side, that's additional savings for the city. If we assume or do some discount or even assume all of 1 and 2, I know 2 is kind of open-ended, but we don't have those same regulatory issues so we don't have a depreciated dollar in that type of a investment. We're at least going to get, our dollars going to be just go just as far as their dollars in the phase 1 and 2, but not in the demolition. Their dollars will go further, so let's let them put their dollars into the demo. And we could assume the whole cost of 1 and 2, the difference is $15,000, just on face value.
The other thing I'll point out is, if we don't do anything and we just go on down the line, the city will be expending at least $50,000 on attorney fees before this is over. Because the appeal process plus the lawsuit, which I'm pretty sure that tortious interference count will stick, therefore we'll be partly responsible for the defense of it. It'll be easy, $50,000.
I don't think we've ever had lawyer fees of $50,000.
Never had that much?
That'd be cheap.
Well,
Yeah.
as far as a bargaining chip, I mean, they can pinpoint the $130,000 for demolition. That's a known number to them that they've talked with somebody about apparently. The $50,000 could be much higher than that. So it's a gamble on our part, but maybe it's not that high. Maybe it's lower. My point is, if we let them pay the $130,000, we're getting more bang for our buck in that regard. And
You want to make a motion of that?
And that's for them to do 1 and 2?
No, we would assume the cost for phase 1 and the 1 and 2, because that's the 50,000.
Mhm.
I know it's an unknown on the 50, but it's less than, I mean, if you take half of the 130, that's 65, add that to half of the 50, another 25, I mean, you're at 80,000 there.
I'll make a motion.
Tom?
I make a motion that we buy the property for $875,000. We pay for phase 1 and 2, and they pay for the demolition.
I'll second that.
Have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
All right. I'll convey that, Mr. Geison's father died. I think the funeral was today, so I'll try and get ahold of him tomorrow. Hopefully he's in.
Cost us a fortune.
And then, maybe be able to get a report back by Monday afternoon. Okay?
Yep.
For the next meeting?
Yep. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Have a good night.
I guess you got the big